Hi there. Welcome to Tech Talk Weekly. I'm Bob from Creation Station. This is our weekly show where we give you 3 or 4, I've got way more this time, interesting stories in the news. In fact, we have so many stories this week. SpaceX successfully launching the biggest rocket in the world didn't make the rundown. But if you've got a story you want us to cover, Creation Station at broward.org comes right to us, and we'll be glad to take a look at them for you. My guest today is Miss Carla Brown from Maine Library. How are you doing?
I'm fine, Bob. How are you?
Life is good. You work in the studio. You've got one of the fun, cool jobs in this library system because you're in charge of the studio at Maine Library right now. Tell people what that is.
Well, the Teen Studio, it is a digital arts and media production space. There's lots to offer for teens. There's arts and crafts, there's gaming, both electronic and board games. There's film production via green screen and the ChromaVid app. There's music production with the keyboards. Um, there's graphic design. So there's like a
Yeah,
little bit of something for
it's
everybody.
it's an amazing little place. If you have
Mm.
teens that have not been here, bring them down. But parents, little kids, sorry. 13 to 19-year-olds only, no adults, no teachers, no nothing. Carla's there to make sure the place doesn't burn down. But beyond that, the teens are in charge. It's a really great space for them.
Absolutely.
It's great. Now, we've got some really weird stories today. I will say we cover the gamut over all sorts of different stuff. And several of these Carla brought in, and we had one that came in by email. So thank everybody out there for contributing to the show. And the first one was what happens to animals during an eclipse? You found this one, didn't you, Carla?
I did.
So we've been talking about this for a few weeks now, several episodes. There's a big solar eclipse coming across a good chunk of the United States, Texas on up to Maine, for the totality area. Down here in South Florida, we'll see some of it. But yeah, this is fun. So they're recruiting volunteers all across the part of totality for 2 reasons. One is this one with animals, and then NASA has another one to get you all of those things. But tell me, what did you like about the animal one there, Carla?
I just thought it was unique. Um, yeah, just to see how they react during the eclipse. It's interesting to see whether they react difference between a total solar eclipse versus like a partial eclipse. That would be something interesting to see as well.
Yeah, and it was really interesting because if you do a little bit of history stuff or whatever, you will see and hear like the animals acted wild and then the sun disappeared. It turns out the animals actually do act wild. Um, so in the Columbia, South Carolina Zoo, they when that happened 7 years ago with the previous solar eclipse that went through there with totalitarian, the Galapagos tortoises that are just sitting around all day long doing nothing, all of a sudden went into mating mode
Wow.
just instantaneously when the sun disappeared. Don't know why. It's weird.
It's probably due to the sudden change in light and temperature, and they have their different body rhythms that
Uh huh.
react to different things.
That's a
So,
really good point. That is really good because that's one of the things that we talked about on the show 2 weeks ago about clouds disappearing during a solar eclipse because of the temperature differences at those sudden temperature differences when the sun goes away in the middle, unlike normal evening when it slowly cools down and slowly warms up in the dawn. This like suddenness freaks not only people but a lot of animals out.
yeah, they need to study people too, human behavior as well as
Uh-huh.
animal
Yeah.
behavior.
Yeah, this is gonna be one of those really intensely watched things, probably over the course of our lifetime, because this is not happening again in North America, where it is so densely packed and populated for decades, a long, long time.
Yeah.
But if you do get the chance, again, you need to go follow the links that we put in the show notes because there's some really good stuff. There's one there right now from space.com that gives you exactly what you can do to help solar physicists from your own backyard. with your regular cell phone or with a telescope or with a camera, being able to take pictures and doing things. Also, remember, don't look at a solar eclipse. Put the glasses on. Don't look at it through your camera lens. It's still just as bad. Put the glasses on first.
And you
Then
can get
you're
the
okay.
glasses right here at the library.
See, there you go. Carla's got you covered. You can. We still have eclipse glasses at most of our libraries. I think one or two. I think I saw something about them running low or out, but we still have some. You've still got another 2 weeks or so before it's April 8th is when the eclipse is going to happen. I didn't even think to check. I'm gonna have to check and see if we got any meetings that day. I better not. Or maybe I'll call out sick. Nah, I wouldn't do that to my boss. I wouldn't do that. But there's a lot of different things you can go do and check for your solar eclipse to be ready to help out if you want to, or just take it in. The last one, I was home for the day and I would just walk out in the backyard and lay it on the grass and just watched it for a little while. It was fun. It's cool.
It's cool.
Speaking of people doing crazy things, when did you start wearing clothing, Carla?
Well, when my mom brought me up as a kid, I hope she
Yeah.
put me in some
Yeah.
clothes.
Most of us, I'm pretty sure most of us listening to this podcast are pretty used to wearing clothing.
Yeah.
It turns out this is a minorly controversial thing of when did we actually start wearing clothes? What did you think about that idea about the bearskins?
I think I missed that. What did they say about that one?
So one of the ways they were able to tell when people were taking things and starting to make clothing was if you skin an animal, there's markings around the skull, around the ankles and feet, the tail, where the skin comes really close to the bone. So as the hunters were skinning an animal and taking that bear skin off, when the examples I use here is bear skin, we know that people were doing that tens of thousands of years ago.
Wow.
We can't prove that they were using it for clothing versus just wrap themselves up in it versus use it as a tent versus there's a little bit of difference there.
Hmm. Yeah, what interests me was when I saw them talk about lice and how they use that to determine when the clothing thing came along with.
Yeah.
That was sounds very disgusting to me, but
Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting that they can track the um, evolution, I guess is the best word for it. The evolution of lice into different types of things where they got specialized in eating only hair from your head, hair from your pubic area, hair from animals versus from humans. So, and we're talking 170,000 years ago. So it's been a long time that we started wearing some kind of clothing, having something draped around us and doing stuff. But then how do you prove that they actually worked clothing pieces together? Because
yeah, it's happened so long ago you can't prove with certainty
yeah,
when humans actually started wearing clothes. It could
I'm
have been for practical
looking.
reasons. It could have been because they were trying to protect themselves from the elements.
Yeah.
You never know.
So the thing in this article that amused me the most was the two things. One, it's 300,000 years to 170,000 years. We've been doing something with these furs and clothing and all this stuff.
Hmm.
But then about 32,000 years ago, some people just stopped wearing clothing. They just said, you know what? This is too much effort. We're not going to wear clothing anymore. And they didn't wear clothing for 20,000 years.
Oh my goodness.
And then they picked up wearing clothing again.
Sometimes working here at the library, clothing is optional because we We walk into the restroom sometimes and people
Uh-huh.
don't.
Yeah. Isn't it crazy?
It
And
is.
it's really weird because they're guessing it has something to do with climate change because they have all of the examples of the, like we talked about earlier, with the bones being scraped. They have the actual tools for sewing that are there, and then they just disappear for 20,000 years, and then people start using them again. Like they reinvented it when it got cooler again and they needed to wear clothing again. Maybe. I mean, we're guessing it's 12,000 years ago. So
Yeah,
who knows why they all of a sudden started wearing clothing 12,000 years ago.
you can never be certain. So,
I just like crazy. But there's a whole section of almost 20,000 years where there's no record in that part of the world, Tasmania down near Australia, where there's no record of anyone doing any kind of clothing, sewing, anything.
wow.
Yeah, I'm like, I kind of like the idea, not having to worry about, getting dressed in the morning. Just South Florida, there's times you really don't want to be dressed. But
You have to have very positive body image.
we would just all accept it. If we just would all accept each other, that would be great, you know? And speaking of bodies and images, how many people do you think there are in the world? There's a lot of bodies. We got two quick stories for you because we just possibly can't talk about the one of them. It's crazy. So, population growth over the last 150 years. Nice, simple graphic form for you. Visual Capitalist is the website if you ever want to just spend a little bit of time browsing through some interesting infographics. They put a new one out this week as part of a new study also for how many people. North America had 104 million people. By 2050, so less than 25 years from now, we are going to have 679 million people.
Mhm.
It's a lot. It's just an amazing number. Europe is actually going to shrink a little bit by like 20 million people or so, going down. Asia is going to go up. Everybody's going to go up. Pretty much everyone is going up.
So everyone's going up but Europe?
Everyone's going up but Europe. Europe is the only place where it has evened out overall as part of the whole continent, as a whole region. Like some areas in Asia, like Japan, has already got a very steady to slight decrease in population because of aging and just population shifts.
Low birth rates?
Yes, exactly.
Okay. Mhm.
Europe's the only place that's going to be doing that on a regular basis. Part of where all that came from is this new Lancet study they just released the other day on the 11th. And I know, Carla, when I sent you this, you were like, what the heck is
Ah.
he trying to do to me? They went through every country, 204 countries, every year from 1950 to 2021 and looked at every single factor of every single person in their birth and death, when they were born, when they died, how they died. It's a huge study. It's insanely detailed. It is something like 60 pages
100.
long. We're
Oh,
not
okay.
dealing with the whole thing today, but there were two interesting things that I wanted to point out. And again, the link is in the show notes. Go read this when you get quiet time and you want to look. But some of this stuff, and you can just see I'm scrolling and scrolling and scrolling and scrolling and scrolling. Two of the things was one, when the pandemic hit, and I'm going to bring you the first slide, you can see how, in general, life expectancy and how people are going was just steady, slightly going up in most cases, etc. And then the pandemic hits and bam, everybody falls off a cliff all across the planet. But also, part of the issue was we went from a 30% of people reporting actual deaths and how they died and why they died in 1975 to 61%, and then it stops again, and then it drops off in the last couple of years of the study, but that's because it takes time to gather all the data and everything, so they didn't have complete data for the last 2 years, and we all know how many people were just dying and not actually being accounted for how they actually died.
Okay.
Completeness in China was at 71.2% in 2018, and India went in 2019 at 80%. So they've done some really good studies in here, and it is so detailed about how people died, why they died. Not individual people, obviously, but there's just chart after chart of these heat maps of exactly who, what, where, and all of these things. And if you're into statistics, it's great. And if you just want to know why and how different people died based on gender or age or whatever, because there's some suspicion here that some people are dying that aren't being accounted for. They're just, we can show records of them being born, and then we can't show records of them dying. It's weird.
Yeah, what I found interesting about it is it talks about the mortality rates and by age,
Yeah.
and like males versus females, age 15 and older, had a higher mortality rate than kids under 5, and all of that was due to the pandemic. So
Yeah.
that's what I found
Yeah.
interesting.
Especially over the last few years. Yeah. I mean, we turned globally everything on its head, because globally it was for centuries. It has been little kids die. That's why some people have big families, because little kids are dying. We started getting away from that, and then all of a sudden the older kids started dying. And
Yeah.
it's
hmm
like I said, you really want to go read this and go dive into this. There's amazing stuff in this, and it's, again, probably an hour read.
Yeah, if at least.
But it's actually written for the layman too, so you can probably understand if you just take your time with it and understand it and walk through what all these different things mean. And that's why seeing it in a nice, easy infographic. Yeah, hey, now we know. This is why we're growing. I mean, we did a tremendous amount of growth, and it's slowly easing out almost all around the world now.
Yeah.
And then we got one more story that I am so glad you brought this one to us, Carla. This was crazy.
Yeah, when I saw dementia, I have a grandmother, she's 95 and she's suffering from dementia, so
Yeah.
uh, it hits
So
home
the
for me.
gist of this story is that people are being diagnosed with dementia right now that may not have dementia. They may actually have a liver disease with ammonia building up in your system, which pollutes your brain, which causes your brain to act weird. But as soon as you get the ammonia out, your brain goes back to normal. And I was just like, wow. It's HE is what the abbreviation for. Let me get the exact name.
Hepatic
Hepatic
encephalopathy.
encephalopathy. Thank you. And one of the things, and if people are out there thinking, well, of course it's your liver, you're drinking too much. No, it's not. It's not about cirrhosis, which is when you drink too much and you're alcohol poisoning to your liver. It is a thing that happens that they find when you get cirrhosis, but you don't have to get cirrhosis to have this. And if you find it early enough, it can be prevented and stop the damage to your liver and find the damage to your brain, which was great.
But the people that they surveyed were veterans, and I wonder
Yeah,
why they
that
chose that
is one of the
particular.
interesting. Let's see if I can find. Oops, went right on past it. Here we go. So one of the things about the data that they do call out in the article: 97% of the people tested were male, 80% were white. So this is not a well generated study. Most studies would not do this kind of thing, but because they were operating and using U.S. military veterans, that just how their pool of candidates was, and at least they admitted to it in the study and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I was like, wow.
Very interesting stuff.
I mean, isn't it? I mean, I'm just like, that's just craziness of 10% of the people diagnosed with dementia may not have it. They may have a liver disease instead.
Yep. You gotta get the right diagnosis.
Yeah, we keep finding new things all the time. Thank you so much for being here, Miss Carla. We
You're
just flew
welcome.
right by that time frame here. Let me throw up our end screen here. If there is a librarian or a library you want to see featured on the show, reach out. creationstation@broward.org. And don't forget to subscribe.
Okay.
Done.